Live. All
You
right.
look very mysterious with a black background.
That's what I'm going for.
And that is what we call pre-show banter. So thank you everybody for joining and whoever's watching. This is the Street Epistemology Community Livestream, episode 3. And this is being recorded live on Saturday, the 9th of December, 2017. I apologize for the delay. We are having some technical difficulties on my end, and our special guest today, we are also having some difficulties getting her in. But now that everybody's on, let's go ahead and get started. So do we want to go and do introductions again? I know everybody but Christine was here last time.
Oh, yes, please. I don't know anybody's names except for yours, Tim.
Okay. So my name's Tim. I'm fairly new to the SE community, and I've somehow fallen into the role of kind of organizing these community live streams, not to be confused with the actual Epistemic podcast. So I'm just kind of running things here, trying to come up with topics to discuss, and I'm also going to be trying to watch the live chat. And in the mysterious nuclear silo black background is Doug from the Pine Creek YouTube channel.
AKA Doug, yes, past tense of dig. Not to be confused with my twin brother, Pine River.
Great game, by the way. I love some Dig Dug. And we've sporting a brand new blue Primate microphone is Jordan.
That's me.
And we've also got Hangout veteran Pete, who was here the first community live stream. So thanks for joining, Pete. And do you have a YouTube channel, Pete, or you just involved in the community?
I don't. I'm just an observer.
And joining us for the first time is our first female participant, Christine. And she's having some issues with her video equipment, so she's audio only, but we have a lovely thumbnail over there. So go ahead and introduce yourself, Christine.
Hey, guys. I'm Christine Lamoth. I've been involved with SE since, I think, January. I got into it I started asking on Facebook. I was really tired of a year of arguing fruitlessly with people about Trump, and I started thinking maybe there's a way to stealth debate so that it doesn't trigger the backlash. And a friend of mine clued me into street epistemology and said, hey, go watch Anthony Magnamasso's videos. And I did.
All hail Anthony. I mean, hail Hydra. I mean, because apparently he's the leader of this movement. So thank you for that introduction, Christine. Glad to have you. And before we jump into conversation topics, I just wanted to address something from the last live stream. I had quoted an apologist, or misquoted rather, an apologist, Cameron Bertuzzi. He actually made a counter post on his page saying that I didn't quite quote him properly, so I wanted to take the time to, out of respect and dignity, correct that. What I originally said was that people who, what I originally said was that his critique was that street epistemologists, because we don't have degrees or formal training in epistemology, we can't ask questions of people. But what he actually said was, because we lack the formal training, we're not in a position to disparage God belief. So whether you think that's substantially different from what I said, I'll leave that up to you, the viewer, but just want to put it out there.
I got to ask, is that what he said? Disparage God belief?
Sounds about right, I think.
That's what he said. I agree with him. And I don't think SE is doing that at all. Actually, I think a lot of people need a God belief, and I would not disparage that at all. If his main complaint is disparaging, hey, we're in the same team.
What qualifies as a proper education or training in epistemology?
12 credit hours.
What qualifies as disparaging?
And just to I'm just, you two can, you all can talk. I'm trying to pull up the actual post so that I'm not misquoting him again.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure his criteria for someone who's certified in epistemology may be different from, I don't know, a Peter Boghossian.
Yeah, I asked that exact question. Like, are we talking a certain number of credit hours at an accredited university? What are we talking about here? And of course, didn't get an answer. I shouldn't say of course, but I did not get an answer. I think the goal is, hey guys, maybe there's some things you guys haven't considered yet that maybe I could help you with. That's the kind of feeling I got from it all. And I think
if we're doing
I'm
it right, we
curious,
do it with an
though.
open mind. So
yeah, and it
I'm
sounds
curious though, because you guys are familiar with Matt Dillahunty, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
No?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
He,
Yes.
yeah. He's on the atheist experience. He was studying for years and years and years to be a pastor. He's read the Bible like 30,000 times. Would they think that someone like him is qualified to disparage God? Because he does it fairly regularly. I'm just wondering if they would find that more acceptable.
No, they actually would just call him, he wasn't a true Christian or a true believer. Some of them would say that, of course, not all. Some of them might say that he was he deceived himself along the way. He didn't walk the right path. Like, I'm very familiar with the Bible as well. And it doesn't seem to help at all, because they'll just say, well, it was the wrong version of Christianity you were raised with, or you just really didn't understand, or you just unfortunately had questions that you went to the wrong people to get answers with. It just, there's always an excuse.
All right, so I found the quote from Cameron, and we're not going to belabor this point too much longer. So he said, the second criticism they ascribe to me is, quote, since street epistemologists don't know any epistemology, therefore they can't go out and ask people questions about what they believe. And so his response to that wasn't the argument he was actually given. What he actually said in the original post on his blog was, keep in mind that street epistemologists are not epistemologists. Most haven't even picked up a single book on the subject. Their training materials focus on the psychology of belief rather than on the epistemology behind it. As such, they are in no position whatever to disparage your reasons for belief in God. So I'm glad I actually looked it up there, because he didn't say disparage God belief, but disparaging reasons for God belief. So that's what I was referring to when I said that he said that because we have no training or education in epistemology, we aren't in a we can't ask questions.
But if we recognize that some reasons are fallacious, why can't we point that out?
In fact, Cameron Spires.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah, Cam Spires and myself brought that up to Cameron Bertuzzi, that look, there's Christians
Hashtag
out there.
Not all Camerons.
Yeah, I said Cam Spears was making the point basically that, look, there's Christians out there who are Christians because of bad reasons. And I think Cameron Bertuzzi agrees with that that's possible, that there are Christians out there who believe for bad reasons. Wouldn't you want SC used as a method to help bring that to light, that maybe the reasons they have for believing in this God is maybe a bad one? Not saying that this God is not real or exists or true and all that. All we're saying is maybe the reasons that this particular person has is not so great.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and, if we don't mind, let's go and move on from that, because we spent a good deal of time discussing that last time. So, as anybody who can't talk to me right now, I don't know how the Facebook study group for street epistemology, but I actually created a poll to ask for questions, and I think and we were discussing this in the pre-show banter. I think I actually probably.
Is Tim having a connection issue for you guys?
Suggestions
Yeah.
for topic.
Tim's
that I
connection.
He mentioned he was having microphone issues.
So I'll probably.
Whoa.
He's totally
Okay,
frozen.
now.
Tim, you're choppy a bit. Your connection's a little choppy and laggy.
Okay. Just a moment here.
I think that might work.
Does anybody here like curling?
I'm looking forward to watching someone during the Olympics.
Oh, there was something I heard from the Hangout that Ocean was in after his SE experience. He said that he gets the impression that Anthony's kind of like a cult leader, or he has characteristics of one. And I was like, well, I mean, if he's seen as the one of the leaders of the movement, I mean, like, there's going to be traits in common, but like, I think there's a little more to it. Than there's more to being a cult than having leadership. I guess like that. I don't know. It's
All right, sorry about that. Yeah, I want to start a SE coffee drinking game. Anytime somebody brings up Anthony, I'm going to take a drink. In my lovely local North Carolina pottery.
I would push back before Tim takes over there on Anthony being the leader. I would say he's definitely one of the biggest proponents of SE out there, but people may gain interest in the SE method through his videos. But I don't know. I would think that maybe Anthony wouldn't like the term leader as much. He's just more of a outspoken advocate for it.
Well, he's definitely one of the most visible practitioners of it, at least on YouTube. I mean, but there's no formal hierarchy or anything like that. So anyway, I apologize for the connection issues I was having there. It could be due to the snow we're getting here in the Charlotte area right now. I'm out of the Charlotte, North Carolina area. So let's go ahead and just dive right in. So I probably phrased it poorly in the Facebook poll, but one of the topics I wanted to touch on, this is why I asked Christine to come, and thank you again, Christine, for joining. But one of the questions I wanted to address in the community live stream this weekend was, why do we have an apparent lack of, why do we think we have an apparent lack of female participation? We know that there are females in the group, but it seems like they're represented kind of as a minority, much more than, say, atheists at large, or definitely the public at large, because, of course, the human population is roughly half female, half male. So it definitely seems like, though, in places like the SE Facebook group or these Hangouts, it seems like we have far fewer women participating. So rather than me just kind of pontificate as a big bearded North American neckbeard here about all this, I figured I'd ask Christine and see what she thinks from the female perspective on this.
Thank you. I do actually have some notes. I had a bit of a revelation the other night, and because it was the other night, my notes are very scattered because I just wrote them down, but hopefully they're coherent. It depends, like, one of the big things that another girl in the group brought up is that whenever someone asks this question, it seems that the conversation always gets shoehorned into, well, men are just naturally better because this, and this, and then the discussion just stops. So my take on that is, even if someone says that men are naturally better at SE and more inclined to join the group, whatever, even if that's right, that doesn't solve anything if the ultimate purpose of asking that question is to get more women involved. Because again, the conversation just stops there. So even if that's the case, let's just set that aside for now and try to focus on the reasons that we can actually do something about. Like, I was thinking that maybe it's a similar problem as, and this is probably going to be controversial for some people in the group, but I think it's a similar problem as Black people are facing in American culture right now, because there's like a systemic discouragement. People see women as fulfilling certain gender roles, and I know that not everybody does. I know that not every culture is like this, but majority of cultures, if you are currently an adult female in the world, you probably grew up hearing and having it reinforced that You know, it's better if you're seen and not heard. You want to be ladylike. You don't want to interrupt other people. Don't put yourself forward. Let guys do that. And, you know, intellectual pursuits are more the domain of guys. And that kind of systemic discouragement, even if it's not your natural inclination, you can internalize that. And it kind of shuts you down before you even get started. And something I've noticed in the last year as I've been trying to identify and acknowledge the ways in which I am racist toward Black people in America and feeding into systemic racism. I think some of the same tactics that I've been using that have been helping me might help here as well. My big sister, Kara, has been involved for a while with Black Lives Matter, and she gave me some advice last year that I've been applying more and more, which is to listen, to make an effort to listen when a Black person's talking, to reach out more, to try harder to understand, and to make more effort to just, I guess, expose yourself to that way of thinking, to that sort of social circle. So I've been like subscribing to The Root. I've been trying to watch more and more YouTube videos by Black people. And I think it's helping. Like, I used to be very afraid of Black people, and I'm not so much anymore. I realize that a lot of that's just stupid. And it's just easier for me to relate, and it's easier for me to listen now. But I had to make a very conscious effort to counteract the default attitude that I was raised with and that I internalized for that. And an article I read on The Root lately, you know, it's pointed out that a lot of white people are saying, well, is this all fair in a world where everything's supposed to be equal? And the answer is no, but not everything is equal in this world. In fact, things are very not equal, and that's why this sort of effort can be necessary. And as an example of this, for this situation of gender roles and lack of female involvement in SE, Anthony actually reached out to me a few months after I'd been in the group and I'd been making posts, and he encouraged me to contribute. And that helped. It's also helped me to see other women here. Just the seeing others, it's just something you naturally, it helps you think that this isn't so weird. And folks also reached out to me to join this discussion and said, hey, would you want to take part? And that was also effective. I don't think I would have joined this discussion if you guys hadn't asked me to. So thank you for that. It really did help, because my natural inclination is to just avoid this stuff like the plague. I don't want to speak normally for fear of coming out wrong. I'm not used to it, but if someone tells me they want to hear from me, I am much more willing than I normally would be to talk. And that's about it.
Okay, good. So, well, thank you for sharing that. And you definitely made some points that I've actually tried to reflect on and consider. I know we had, Christine and you and I had been engaged in chat before you agreed to come on to the Hangout today. And, you know, coming from a fundamentalist Christian conservative, you know, full-on young earth creationist background myself, I'm definitely trying to take inventory of how much of those biases and prejudices are still latent, even though I've kind of discarded the underlying theology that seemed to underpin some of those. I think you made a very good point, though, about the social norms. I don't know, what was he said? The gender roles, the social gender roles, about how maybe the lack of female participation is because women aren't encouraged to speak out, and they are, you know, basically, like you said, told to be quiet and respectful a lot of times. I know my wife, for example, and she's still a believer, but my wife, even though she's a very social person, much more so than myself, she, when it comes to matters of faith and belief, she's very non-confrontational. And so that's one reason why SE appealed to me as well, echoing some of what you said, Christine, that I wanted a less adversarial approach to discuss these beliefs. And I also find the SE process to be reflective. I know I've often had my mind changed discussing things with the interlocutor. And even if it's in a topic we agree upon, I've often found that my reasons were insufficient. I actually had an interesting SE exchange about free will one time. And even though I tend to adopt more of a deterministic view of that, with some compatibilism in there, and I found some of my reasoning wasn't quite as grounded as I would like. So did anybody else on the panel have anything to add or offer to what Christine said?
Yeah, before we say anything else, I did vote for that particular topic of, have we had our minds changed by our interlocutors? That's something I think that is worth talking about. But
yeah, we can discuss multiple topics today.
Yeah.
There's no
yeah.
no limit there. Were you wanting to say something, Doug or Pete? I know you guys were just sitting there.
Yeah, Christine, like one of the first things you mentioned was had the word "better" in it. Well, can you repeat what you heard people say?
Yeah. I think I want to say her name was Jessica, and please forgive me if I'm completely wrong on that. But she pointed out that this sort of discussion about how can we get more women involved in SE, or why aren't more women involved in SE, usually gets shut down with the argument that men are naturally better at SE.
Okay. See, I would like to bring up the point that it could be true that women are more hesitant to confront people or even ask questions of people about deeply held beliefs. But at the same time, that when they do it, they are better than men. So I think those two are two separate things. I have no evidence to say that women are better than men or men are better than women when actually engaging in SE. But my hypothesis is, and you can tell me what you think of it, and I think the science supports this, is that in general, women are more risk adverse than men. Now that has
possible.
Yeah, and that has no implication on betterness or that men are better at something than women. It's just, I think, and I'll quote Sapiens, he has a weird name, Yuri something, but it stems from evolution, just the fact that women have one egg per cycle, and whereas men have millions and millions of sperm, and so they are taking risks to reproduce, whereas the woman is more cautious in finding that one man who can take care of her and the child through, if we were looking back throughout the history of man. And so if that's true, that women in general are more risk adverse, I think that explains two things. Number one, it explains why there's fewer female atheists in the world. And number two, it explains why it's even more underrepresented in the SE community, because just the fact of just going out there or being vulnerable and asking people questions, knowing that they could ask questions back of you, is a risk.
Yeah, Doug, I remember back in the Blab days, you were training a woman in doing SE. I forgot.
I was.
She had doctor in her name, Dr. Breakfast.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I know what you mean.
And I'm just curious what you thought that experience was like. I mean, she seemed like someone who was very interested in SE and was right there and was eager to try it on her own. And Doug was watching her do it and coaching her just like we would coach each other. And
well, that's one of the reasons why I brought up the first thing I said. I think if more women were to attempt to do SE, I actually think they would be better at it than men.
I think that because SE is an attempt to have better conversations, so it's handy for when you have a disagreement with someone. I would think like that's something that I think if women are interested in having good conversation with people, you know, if they have a higher propensity for socializing, then SE has something to offer them. Uh, but in terms of like what what reasons we have for why SE appeals to us, is there any difference between, you know, men and women? I don't know if the differences are even there. We like it for the same reasons, don't we?
Well, I think it would be helpful in that respect if you told me why you like it and I can compare.
Yeah, I what definitely drew me in was the from watching Anthony's videos, being able to get the interlocutor to be more honest and reduce the backfire effect. My personal thing that I like about SE the most is getting people to think, and that's kind of like the teacher personality that I have, and I noticed how effective SE was at doing that, and I saw it as I contrasted that with the conversations I've had, for example, with my older brother. We've had a history of being very argumentative with each other, and I wanted to improve that. I wanted a way to come to a mutual understanding more effectively.
Yep, that's pretty much my reasons.
Well, as a father of two young daughters, I'd also like to add that it seems like this conversation has a lot of commonalities with, you know, I work in a STEM field. I'm a network engineer. That's what pays my bills. And while there's definitely more women now than there were when I started, men are still very much a male dominated field. And I've often pondered this myself, and this is just me kind of thinking out loud. I've often pondered this because I don't think I've actively discouraged women in conversations or I mean, I can't control who applies for a job. Now, I'm also not in a position to hire. I'm just an engineer. I'm not a manager or anything. So I find it. I've always wondered why are there so many men in fields like engineering and science and that sort of thing. Maybe a lot of those same reasons dovetail into the SE thing. I don't know. I mean, I'm just throwing that out there. I know
I think part of it's inertia. Women come into this group and they see men talking. Okay, so this is mostly for guys. All right. And some people are going to be comfortable with that. Some people are going to say, okay, this is not for me because I am not a guy, so I will move on.
So, okay, so, and I'm not arguing that point, but what could we do? I mean, because someone else brought up a point in the poll before I had to shut down the comments because it started getting heated there. Someone else brought up a point about, and this is another woman. I can't remember her name offhand because I don't have the poll post pulled up. It's still there. It's just the comments are locked. She said, "Well, I don't like conversations like these because I don't want to feel. I hate feeling like, and I'm probably paraphrasing here. I hate feeling like I'm just here to fulfill a quota or something."
Yeah.
So there's that.
That's always going to be an issue.
So, I mean, I'm not trying to sound frustrated or.
Oh, no. I get it. I completely get it. And I was thinking about this the other night.
It's like, how do we solicit the female participation without saying, hey, we just need a token girl here or token woman here?
Well, it has occurred to me that, maybe Anthony reached out to me just more because I'm a girl than because he liked what I was saying. And I mean, who would like that feeling? That sucks. And it's definitely occurred to me, because it's fairly obvious, that you guys reached out to include me in this because you wanted a female voice. And, you know, I want to be valued for something besides being female. But at the same time, I'm not sure of how else to fix this apart from people just making more of an effort to maybe counteract inertia and biases that they might not even be aware that they have.
Yeah.
Which is why I brought up the whole other thing with my efforts to counteract my own racism that I wasn't aware of previously.
It's almost like a catch. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's cool. It's really hard to balance it perfectly, and nobody's going to be happy with all of it. But I have noticed that when I made those efforts to, I don't know, I guess just listen more and try harder to understand in those cases where I was like reading an article by a primarily Black website or listening to a YouTube video by a Black person. When I tried harder, it just helped. It helped me correct the deficit that I didn't even know was there. And I'm by no means perfect at it, and I still have a lot to learn, but I am a lot better than I used to be.
And it's kind of like it's almost like a catch-22 where, you know, I mean, my intent was not to make, when I reached out to you to have you join, my intent wasn't to just say, well, we just want you here because you have 2 X chromosomes. But
oh yeah, yeah.
But at the same time, I know you and I had been going back and forth some of the comment threads, and it was civil. And you know, I know you would comment on some of my posts before. So one reason I reached out to you was I felt like, well, she definitely seems like somebody I would like to hear on here because she's more active in the community. She's not a lurker. I mean, there were women in the group that I never. Now again, the plural of anecdote is not data, but there are women in the group that I had not really seen comment that much, who came out of the woodwork and started commenting on that poll, and that's great. You know, that was kind of one of the reasons I threw that question out there, because I was hoping it would spark some discussion and participation. But then it just, you know, dive bombed, and it got to some heated back and forth between a couple people. So,
well, there's a lot of issues going around right now with regard to sexism that a lot of women, not all women, but a lot of women are feeling very prickly about, myself included. And it's very easy to spark that tinderbox, I guess.
Yeah. You're referring to the
like even if you have perfect intentions, you can still say something that just you know, what's the word? It's grating on top of like an already raw wound that might be just really fresh for some women right now.
Yeah, we actually have a question in the YouTube chat. Reese SE asked, "Does ratios, or maybe they meant do ratios matter in an intellectual discussion or dialogue, such as male to female ratio, gay to straight, etc.? Should it just be X amount of people in SE?" So I'm just going to toss that question to the group. And
good question.
Yeah. And
I need help understanding that one. What are they saying?
The question is basically, does it even matter that there's so few women in SE? Shouldn't we just care about people? I think that's the question.
Yeah, I think I mean, and Reese, if you can pipe up in the chat, or you can actually join the Hangout if you want. I mean, it's an open Hangout. I think what Reese is getting at here is, should we care? Should we be focused? Should we care about how many women are in the group, active in the group, or how many straight or gay people, or black or white, whatever. I'm not saying water to be dismissive, but just whatever metric you want. should we be focusing on that, or should we just say, let's just try to get more people involved, and then eventually it'll take care of itself? Maybe. I mean, I'm not trying to put words in Reese's mouth. I'm just extrapolating. I mean, I think it is a good question, and I think where I would chime in with that is, I think it's a good conversation. I think the ratios are a good conversation topic because we want to make sure that we are not doing anything as a community to discourage participation from other people. You know what I'm saying? So that was one reason why I wanted to.
If there's any obstacles to participation in that regard, like that's more an obstacle for them than us, then yeah, we want to address that.
And it's probably, and I think a lot of those do the fact that I phrased the question poorly in the poll. I think my whole point was, let's examine ourselves as a community, and let's make sure that we can try to remove any bias that may be there or any barriers to participation. I mean, but at the same time, we don't want to just artificially say, hey, let's just recruit a bunch of women or a bunch of homosexual people or whatever just to fulfill a quota. We don't want to do that either. But are we being open? Or are we doing anything that would discourage women? I know somebody brought up in the comment thread, they said, well, maybe the Peter Boghossian's involvement with the AMFCA book and kind of coining the term street epistemology, even though he's not really, I don't think I've ever seen him even participate in any of the community stuff. I know he's active on Twitter. A lot of people say, well, he's made some sexist comments and we should distance ourselves from him. And that's just one example. I'm not, again, I'm trying to just bring up topics. I'm not saying one way or the other, but is that an example of something we need to look at and say, does the fact that Peter Boghossian is associated with street epistemology, does that discourage certain people from participating?
I can't comment too much on that because, and this will sound terrible, but I have not read that book. I don't know that much about Peter.
You don't have to read the book to be an effective SC.
That's what I figured.
But that's where he coined the term, I think. So that's where a lot of people associate Peter Boghossian as like the Pope of SE or something like that. And I guess Anthony would be, and I'm out of coffee, but Anthony would be the first Red Cardinal, and Doug and Reed are part of the Cardinal Papal Council or what. I'm not familiar with Catholicism as much as
I want to be an altar boy.
You know what? I'm not. I would say I'm not touching that, but then that would just play right into the joke.
I want to make a comment that SE is not a person. It's a method. And I think it's even dangerous. Randall's made a great point in the chat. I think it's even dangerous to view it as a community, although I know community is very important and it helps build people up and so forth. But as soon as you have a community, you have a tribe with certain, well, you're not like me, you're not like us, maybe you should stay on the distance. I think we should just focus on SE being a method, a tool that can be used to have better conversations. And that's it.
And don't forget to enter promo code Pine Creek for 5% off your copy. You get free $5 snarkiness with. I mean, I'm horrible at these improv jokes.
But I was just going to say that, like, even asking the question, we're talking about sexism. Even asking the question, why aren't there more women in SE? Is that not, that could be viewed as a sexist question, even?
Well, I think somebody brought that up as well in the thread.
Yeah.
All right. Hang on, guys. I want to say that there's definitely a difference between talking about stuff happening with the SE method and stuff happening with the SE Facebook groups. And I agree that the SE method is not about genders, but there is definitely a giant disparity in terms of, maybe not even in terms of members, although I'm pretty sure it's there as well. But in terms of the ratio of men to women in the comments, in people participating openly, and you don't have to ask why, and you don't have to care about why, and you don't have to try to fix why. But if you care about why, I think it's a red flag that something is imbalanced here and something could be changed for the better if you consider better to be making sure that everybody who wants to speak has a chance to speak and feels welcome to speak.
Do we know what the ratio is between men and women in like the atheist category?
In the it varies by country.
Varies by country.
In the United States, if you put all the atheists, self-labeled atheists in a room and then counted the genders, I think it's close to 70-30. I could be wrong on that. Someone can fact check that.
Yeah, I don't know how much of an issue, how much that contributes to it, because the impression I get is that, you know, at least in America, men tend to be atheists more than women do. But
apparently in countries like Australia, someone told me this in the other day, it's closer to 52-48 or something, just barely men.
Right.
Somebody, just going back to the, and you know, we've already gone past our first hour, so we can maybe move on to another topic if you guys want, or we can, and lady won't see there I go right there. If you all would like, we can keep on this topic. I've got a few other topics up my proverbial sleeve here, but I did see a comment in the chat from. It's a lot of people have been chatting lately, so I'm trying to go back. Miles posted in the chat that he'd posit that if our groups aren't representative, this goes back to the why is this even a discussion? Why are we focusing on this? And I think Miles makes a good point here that if we aren't representative of the general population, we're losing out on potential talent. And that kind of goes back into the women, and that kind of goes back to the women in STEM field. If you're whether implicitly or actively excluding women from STEM or any other field, really, you're potentially losing out on a large portion of the talent pool there.
Yeah.
But is there anything that, besides the fact that there's a lot of men in SE, is there anything specific why a woman would not want to be in SE?
I think that like feeds like. I mentioned before, if a woman comes into the group and sees that 99 out of 100 comments are from guys and 99 out of 100 posts are from guys, they might think, oh, this is a guy group. Okay, maybe I wouldn't be welcome here.
Would that be a female presupposition?
I think it's a standard human presupposition. If you walk into a place where all the people are really different from you in whatever way, shape, or form, you might start to think, hey, is this for me, or is this more for people that all conform to this very obvious one group?
But I'm thinking, like, if I joined a Facebook group made up of 90% women, and I go in and I see, oh, wow, 90% women, but I'm asking questions, I'm engaging, and everybody's polite to me, I have no reason to leave just based on the fact that there's 90% women. In fact, I'd probably stay.
Yeah, me too.
Everyone being polite to you is definitely not something that happens to women in most Facebook groups, and unfortunately, very much including this one.
Yeah, I agree that online Facebook groups in general is a minefield. It's it's not for the faint of heart. As soon as you engage, you have this wall of protection that people can't see your face, and people tend to be a little more rambunctious when they're commenting. I think that's just par for the course in any group, no matter what the gender mix is, just being on the internet. That's just, the internet's
given the nature of SE, though, I feel like the SE private group, anyway, is it's one of the best groups I've ever been in, in terms of how civil people are with each other.
Well,
not that
definitely
that's
better than the Atheist Experience forum.
right.
There are
It's
so many
yeah.
trolls on that forum.
Yeah, it's
I love that
definitely
show, but that forum, God.
yeah. Yeah, I've seen that. But the nature of SE, what draws people to SE also, tends to draw a crowd of more civil, respectful people, and that much I really appreciate about the group.
It is a help.
Do we want to talk about if interlocutors have influenced our opinions on things?
Sure.
Yeah, we could talk about that. That would be a nice little change of pace, I guess. Not that I don't like this topic, but I know I don't want it to feel like we're just ganging up on Christine here. I mean, hope Christine, you're not feeling like adversarial here. I think
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
I would just like to add on to what Jordan said. The SE private study group is actually where I'm really most active as far as the SE pages, because I think it is we do have a few times where things can get a little heated or out of hand, but by and large, I think it's a pretty civil group. So just a little plug there. Marjorie in the chat was asking, where's the poll? I had to lock the poll, the comment thread.
It was posted on the December 1st, by the way. I tried looking it back up, and that's when it was posted.
So I don't know how Facebook search works if you lock a thread, if it's still searchable. And since it's a private group, I don't know if I can permalink it outside of Facebook. I don't know how that would work. But like Jordan said, it's look for December 1st. I was the one, Tim Davis. I was the one who created the poll.
I think I did a search for live stream this morning on the SE group, and it popped up pretty quick.
Hey, Joe, thanks for joining. I see you got your cup of Doug juice there.
Hey, guys.
Hey, Joe.
Hi, Christine. I've seen your posts a lot, but I've never actually heard your voice or seen you, so it's nice.
Okay.
So yeah, let's move on to the next topic.
Doug, has an interlocutor influenced you?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Could you elaborate?
More on the method aspects than, let's say, philosophical or changing a core belief of mine, because I have very few dogmatic core beliefs. But I've taken in criticisms from Christians, for example, where they say, Doug, you're asking too many questions. Okay, great. That's something I can fix. I can say, okay, and I try as best as I can, and I fail more times than not, but I try to limit my questions to 3, maybe even tell them, especially on Facebook. I'm talking about Facebook text things, which is the worst way to communicate, by the way. So I limited my questions to 3. Going back to Blab days, a guy once told me, Doug, you're being disingenuous because you're not letting people know that where you're coming from. Wouldn't you want a Christian to tell you up front, hey, I'm a Christian and my goal here is to proselytize you into the joy and peace and comfort of Jesus Christ our Lord, before they start with a litany of questions? And I kind of thought to myself, you know what? I think I would want that. So if I desire that for myself, why wouldn't I desire it for another? Now, this is what I'm saying now is kind of controversial in the SC group, because some would say, well, no, we're just asking questions. But from that day forwards, I've made it very clear on my YouTube channel that doubt is a virtue. I think it leads to doubt leads to humility, and certainty leads to arrogance. And I let people know I'm an atheist. My cards are on the table. And then I ask the question, can I interview you, or can I ask you some questions? And since that day, I've never been accused of being disingenuous in that sense, at least.
Just for the record, Doug, next time we converse, I'd like to know up front if you're using Just for Men or not. Just makes it.
Oh yeah. Christine, please don't get mad at this, but we were joking. You know, SE is. We were talking about. That's a bad joke. I apologize, but yeah, I'm growing my beard out.
You're fine.
If there's one thing that's just for men, it's this.
Apparently.
And you can know it because it's right there in print. That makes it
Yeah, it's on the box.
But those Venus razors, man, they've got like 5 blades on them. They feel nice.
Although I bet you there's women out in this world who use just for men somewhere on their body.
And there's probably I know men that use women's products, yeah, because some of them are nice.
What is that just for men? I wasn't actually paying attention. Was it?
Joe, look at yourself in the video. Okay, you see all that gray in your beard?
Yeah. Oh, it's a dye, a hair dye.
Sorry, Tim.
Oh,
yeah.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah, you would look 10 years younger.
I'm staying out of this one. I like my luscious +3.
Well, you have no gray in your beard.
Actually, I do have a few gray hairs there. I don't care. Adds a touch of distinction, I think.
A touch of gray.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you want to plug hashtag not a sponsor. If you want to plug some more products for free, go ahead.
There was something I wanted to say about the mention of being disingenuous and trying to be more upfront on that. I've gotten into trouble with that several times with my friends already, talking about SE with them. And what I run into with that is I feel like there's a conflict between what my natural inclination is in terms of why I'm practicing SE and what I know I should be aiming for when I'm practicing SE. Like, my natural inclination is to try to fix the world so that it all thinks like me, because I think that I'm currently right about every opinion I have. Otherwise, I wouldn't have them. But what I know I should be aiming for is not that. I should just be aiming to be open-minded and having a productive dialogue with someone to learn more about what they think. But, you know, that's not what my natural inclination is to go for. I'm trying to make it like that, but that doesn't mean I'm there yet. And that's probably part of why I come off as disingenuous to a lot of my friends, because there is this clear disconnect between what I'm trying to do and what my impulse is.
That kind of reminds me of the distinction I've kind of tried to make between trying to be persuasive and just trying to get my interlocutor to understand what my perspective is. And yeah, there's kind of just a subtle distinction there, because in both cases you do want them to understand your perspective, but when you're trying to be persuasive, you're actually trying to not just get them to understand, but to adopt it for themselves. And understanding my perspective is really all that I strive for now, or at least cognitively or I don't know. Intellectually, that's what I go for. But at the same time, I can understand how it can kind of be functionally like we're trying to be persuasive as we explain ourselves.
So is SE really any more disingenuous than any other attempt to get people to change their minds? I mean,
no, I would say it's less disingenuous.
To kind of give a selfish plug right here, I kind of introduced maybe a technique that could help sort of circumvent this disingenuousness by just being upfront with a thought experiment, a non-confrontational, dispassionate sort of thought experiment to sort of.
What would that be? What sort of thing would that be, Pete?
It involves a Ferrari or a Lamborghini.
Right. Yeah. The Ferrari experiment. Yeah.
As a way to kind of just introduce them to your method of questioning and just kind of get them on the same page, and then kind of delving into more emotionally charged topics. But
yeah, using an analogy like that is useful for explaining what our intentions are. That makes sense. Yeah, because the analogy can communicate the fact that we're just looking at methods for coming to beliefs.
Sure. And I think I'd be interested to see, I saw Anthony tried it in his video, one of his most recent videos. I'd be interested to see how that works if you were to start a conversation using that thought experiment, but to go into something that, you know, wasn't like a God belief, but to maybe do like a political belief or some sort of social belief or something like that, to see if that still translates, you know, to those other sorts of areas of discussion. I think it's me with the background noise.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't me.
If it's okay, I'd like to clarify something.
Okay.
What do you guys think our ultimate purpose should be when we're applying the SE method? Is it to understand the other person and have a discussion with them, or is it to convince them of how we think, or is it to make them consider our opinion?
Yeah, first is to understand their perspective, and then beyond that,
Oh, like a first goal, and a secondary goal, and a tertiary goal? Like
yeah,
that?
yeah. The first goal is to understand their perspective, and the second would be to, perhaps you could say we want to inspire them to think about the reasons for their beliefs, or the reasons or the ways in which they got to that perspective in the first place. And so it's not even about changing minds; it's just about engaging it and inspiring self-reflection.
I was going to say purely divide and conquer.
Vanquish the enemy. Is that the goal?
No, I second Jordan. I would say it a little more bluntly and encouraging individuals into thinking of all sorts of possibilities on how you can come to an answer, to really push the boundaries of their critical thinking faculties. That's where I come from.
That's similar to the way I think about it. I really think of it more as just trying to get people to think, and to think about everything, not just whatever we're talking about, but to get familiar with the feeling of examining your thoughts and examining why you think something's true. Just roll it around in your head, because a lot of people don't seem to be familiar with with that process. So, you know, teach people how to do that. How do you go about deciding if something's really true? And it ties in for me a lot with the scientific method, which is kind of what it's all about.
As opposed to just jumping on whatever feels right.
Right, using logic and reason and saying, okay, I clearly believe this is true, but why? And should I? And trying to falsify that, you know, as opposed to just running with it because it, you know, gives you a sense of community or makes you feel less frightened of dying or whatever the reasons are.
I would even add that there's almost, at least for me, a slight high or like a moment of revelation when you identify something that is completely counterintuitive, when you just are observing something for you know, a certain way, and then you realize that that is totally not how it is.
Because you're a scientist. Scientists love that.
Yeah, I guess so.
I was wrong. That is so awesome.
Yeah, I mean, oh yeah, I guess, yeah, I'm in a unique position, but there's something awesome about finding out that you're wrong about something, and then just totally changing your position in a way that you hope will bring you towards greater enlightenment, greater truth, better your position in the world, or whatnot.
It's funny, I get that same feeling, and I also get a similar sort of high when I am able to observe somebody else making a connection they hadn't made before. It's like a little bit of a teacher's high, I guess.
Exactly.
Just watching somebody piece
seeing,
something together.
You're seeing the neural synapses, shrink. The connections are being made in front of your eyes.
Yeah, when I was in college, when I was still a student, I was tutoring other students in math, and that's kind of how I discovered, wow, I really have a teacher's personality, because I love to see them like as I'm teaching it to them, and they suddenly get it. They understand the concepts I'm communicating to them. That feels amazing. And
I would also add that there's a revelation of simplicity too, many times, that things are much simpler than you think.
Exactly.
And that you tend to, as humans, our minds tend to make things overly complex, and we can kind of fall into these complexity holes.
I wonder if that sort of, that joy, that sort of pleasure that comes from discovering that you were wrong, so to speak, is you generally only get that if you have you place a very high value on truth. Is that possible?
Yeah.
If you don't place that high value on it, or you're not that concerned with it, maybe it's just frustrating to find out you were wrong. But if you really think it's important, and you find out it's like, oh, I've made progress towards my quest for truthiness.
I was going to talk about one of the memorable SE encounters I had that changed my perspective was when I was talking to the worship pastor at my church when I was going to the Alpha course, the Christianity for Beginners series. We met weekly on Wednesday evenings, and I was talking to the worship pastor, and eventually it got to a point where I said, I explicitly said, I do not believe that faith should be used as an epistemology. And I just got the sense that he understood what I would mean when I said that, because he has a couple degrees. He's educated in that, both with a Master's of Divinity and a secular degree as well. And I think he understood what I meant, because what he said after that was, he asked me, what is the object of faith? Is it, that was kind of the first question he asked, but what he ultimately ended up doing was giving me an alternative understanding of what faith means, even in a way that resonates with me. And if I could describe it, we often think we think of faith being a synonym for trust, and in a sense that's true, but the definition we tend to give for trust is that it's an expectation that you put on something else or someone else. And faith, at least in the religious sense, can be more like an expectation that you try to live up to. And so it's kind of in the other direction. It's where it's like, when you have faith in something, you trust it, and therefore you make a decision that's a response to that trust. So in regard to God, what that usually means is, when someone says that they trust that God will bless them for obeying His commands, right? The faith has two sides to it. One is it's the expectation that they will be blessed in the future if they live according to those commands. So it's the faith is the expectation that they're also living up to. Yeah. It's that expectation that they live up to.
Sounds like just hope. Like, I sure hope I get blessed.
Well, while there's a brief break, welcome Ed to the Hangout. Thanks for joining. I know you hadn't had a chance to really break in yet, and I apologize for that.
Hey, Ed.
Thanks, Tim.
Hi, Ed.
Hello all.
Before we leave that topic behind completely, I wanted to say, with regard to being happy to see others make a connection in their heads and also being happy to find out where you're wrong, like just being happy about being wrong and finding that out. I think part of that for me is that truth and the group realization of it, or at least of more of it, is one of my metrics for how I know or how I think the world or humanity is getting better. Because I think that the more that we can agree on that corresponds to reality, the more awesome stuff we can do. So that just delights me in that respect.
Unless we fall into a situation such as the tragedy of the commons, where we acquire so much truth because we think it's a great thing, but in the long term it just ends up screwing us over, and we just realize that this is all worth nothing in the end.
All right. So that sounds like a good point. We can move on to another topic. So I'll just, I'm trying to remember what some of the other ones that got some top votes were. I know Reed had introduced a topic in that poll of what is the higher virtue, truth or social justice. And that could be kind of a thorny one to unpack, so we can maybe save that for another time. I know we've got about 29 minutes scheduled on this Hangout left. Let me look through the chat, see if there's some back and forth about the morality of doing SE. And I think we kind of touched on that last time a little bit, some of the ethics of SE, when to bail, when not to engage in SE. There's actually an interesting. I'm out of coffee, so I can't do the drinking game. But I think Anthony's most recent video was interesting about. It was somebody who was like a recovering drug or alcohol addict.
Oh dang! I haven't seen that one yet.
Yeah, and I think at a few minutes into it, Anthony even offers to stop the exchange because he's starting to get the sense of.
Maybe they're not ready.
He doesn't want the encounter to be detrimental.
Yeah. Because he was getting the impression that if I probe these beliefs with these questions, if I challenge this belief with these questions, and they start down that belief, is there a possibility they might relapse? So I think that's a good example to the charge of a lot of people think SE is being dishonest or disingenuous or even unethical. I mean, I'm sorry, but if somebody was being unethical with their SE, would they even have that consideration? Would they even entertain stopping the exchange upon learning that? I don't think so.
I think what Upside Down is talking about in the chat, at least, is without even looking at specific cases, is there any connection between seeking truth and morality? And is there any connection between using SE as a method and morality? And I respond to him in the chat that, yeah, I think if someone has a deeply held belief that it's okay to chop another person's head off for believing something different, I think it's good to use this tool called SE to raise doubt in them, because then there's a high probability that they won't cut someone's head off. And to me, cutting
or if they can be easily persuaded to cut someone's head off because of
exactly, yeah. And to me, those are moral acts that immoral acts that humans can do one to another. So that's how I would link the morality to the method.
How do I open that chat?
Oh, the chat. The chat I'm referring to is you have to go to the actual YouTube viewing link. And what I do is there's like a little hamburger button, and you click on that, and it, let's say hamburger button, it's the 3 dots. It's just called, it's a bit of my IT nerd in me, the UI element's called a hamburger button.
And I'm on Google Hangout. Can I open them both at the same time right now?
And what I do is I open the viewing link, then I hit that hamburger button right above the chat and do pop-out chat, and that opens the chat in a separate window. And then I close the video link, so I'm not consuming a bunch of bandwidth trying to view the live stream while I'm also streaming in Hangouts. That's what I do, at least.
You guys don't each have 3 monitors where you can see everything?
My computer is dead, so I'm working off of a tiny little phone.
views.
Oh, you guys are one monitor people. Oh, I think I have to leave.
You guys don't each
I'm
have.
two monitors. I don't have a working computer.
If you mute the video, Ed, too, you can mute the
Yeah.
YouTube video. That way,
Yeah, we're hearing background noise.
yeah, you just hear the delay of us talking.
You guys
Give me
don't
feedback.
Monitors. I don't
Here,
have
I'll mute Ed right quick.
Mute the video, Ed,
Got it.
too. You can mute the YouTube video. That way,
Oh, yeah,
I'm
got
trying
you.
to.
One second.
just hear the delay of us talking.
Somebody mute Ed.
monitors.
Here, I'll mute Ed. There we go. Sorry about that. So yeah, you have to, once you get the pop-out chat going, then just close the tab or window that actually has the video playing. All right, I'll unmute Ed now. All right, sorry about that. So yeah, that's an interesting. Yeah, I saw that from Upside Down, Doug, in the YouTube chat, and that kind of tails into what we were just talking about. I know people have different reasons, for different motivations for getting into SE. I think for me, and I know I'm kind of parroting some of what Dillahunty and some other folks have said, beliefs inform actions, and I'm living in a shared space with about 7 billion other humans. So it's in my self-interest, and I would say our species' self-interest at large, that if we're going to have beliefs informing our actions, we have a vested interest in making sure those beliefs are well-founded and
Conform to
justified.
reality.
Right. And we need to make sure they conform to reality, because we can. The better our beliefs conform with reality, the better decisions we can make.
Yeah.
As individuals and as a society. And I know that is, I mean,
Well said.
Thank you. I mean, I'm kind of borrowing from Matt Dillahunty and a few other people, but that's largely my motivation from it.
For me, it's mostly fundamentalism. Like the people who will say, everything in my whole being says X is true, and I cannot be wrong about that. I think there are some things in life we can get very close to saying things like that, like the shape of the earth. But even then, you got people who think the earth is flat. But so my goal is just to have a little bit of doubt in there on deeply held beliefs. And I think that helps, number one, to be open to changing your mind if indeed you are wrong. And number two, I think it creates an atmosphere of humility that next time you vote or next time you do something to someone else, you think, you know what, I could be wrong about this. Maybe I should rethink this.
Also well
Well,
said.
And I think there was a YouTuber you guys might be familiar with, Dark Matter 2525.
Mhm.
He does a lot of he does like these atheist skeptic animations and cartoons, and there was one of them where it's kind of set in like a post-apocalyptic kind of setting, and he's talking about how what brought about the downfall of our species was dogmatic thought. And I think that kind of goes into what you were saying, Doug, about the fundamentalism, because it's very easy to get focused on the belief, but I think somebody had asked in some debate I was watching, they're saying, if you could, or maybe Doug, I think it was one of your live, or not live, I think it was one of your live streams, where somebody said, if you had the ability to push a button and make everybody a non-believer, would you do that? And I think you said no. And I think the reason for that, and I share that belief, is that if you just make everybody a non-believer without addressing the flawed method at arriving at beliefs, you're really just substituting one dogmatic belief for another. They'll just eventually embrace, somebody who's inclined to embrace fundamentalist religion might just embrace some other kind of fundamentalism or dogmatic belief.
Yeah.
What if you could press a button and everyone became a non-believer, but they became a non-believer because now they understood the method as to why they are a non-believer at that point. It's now they're a non-believer, but they know why. They know the method.
Yeah. I would still I would still not do that, and here's why. I think I would be robbing people of their. And that's a good question, because you could make the Star Trek II argument there that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one or the few, but I think that would be an awfully prideful act, full of hubris, to me to think that I could decide the destiny of a species by pressing a button. Because it's possible that I'm wrong about this. I'm not going to say with 100% certainty that I'm correct in this belief. I'm not going to assert that as dogmatically true. I'm going to leave that little bit of wiggle room open to the possibility that I'm wrong. And to me, and again, I may not have good evidence for what I'm about to say. This is just my feeling and thoughts on it. Who am I to rob the human race of their agency? Even, not getting into the whole discussion about free will versus determinism, but am I any better than these God characters that I discuss and disparage if I were to take such an action and assert my will over somebody?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I got a little long-winded there.
Pete and I go way, way back, so I'm free to say this to Pete. What a stupid question. There
could use a Leon phrase here, but I'm not going to.
Yeah. Because imagine this, Pete. Imagine a fundamentalist Muslim who really thinks that it's good to cut someone's head off, and you take that belief away from them. But they end up now becoming even worse, because now there's no God-type figure holding him back from doing even worse atrocities. Now he's even killing his own family and himself and so forth. This is the scariest part for me that I struggle with SE. There are people who tell me that if they left their God belief, for example, they would become worse people and they would be a harm to themselves and others. And the scariest part for me is they could be telling me the truth. And if that's the case, I don't want to press that button where they now are non-believers, even if all that reasoning stuff comes into play, because they still might become some type of dangerous nihilist. And I don't want that for society. So all I want is that wiggle room.
I'll throw one more variable when you press the button. You get one more gift. Not only do you press the button, everybody becomes a non-believer, they also have justified reasons for why they are no longer believers, but they also have a little bit of room of doubt. Would you then push the button?
Not if they tell me to my face that they're going to become a certain way and do certain things.
But you push the button and we programmed them also to have some room, some space of doubt in there where they can choose to revert their belief should new evidence or new logic present itself.
Yeah, that would bring me great joy and comfort.
The problem is that not everyone's understanding of God is the same. For example, if you defined God to be whatever it is that you value most, it is your highest ideal. Do you want to rob people of that? No. Because whatever that highest ideal is, it could be a good thing. I think we all have one. And yeah, it would be a significant, monstrous intrusion on someone's mind to strip them of that, regardless of what it is. Now, if you're talking about ridding people of a more specific, superstition as it might be described, then I don't know. But some people understand God to be a different thing altogether.
Can I ask, has everyone here gone through a deconversion period in their lives?
Depends. What do you mean?
Tim mentioned coming from a conservative Christian background originally, and so did I, more or less, as far as method counts as conservative. But I went through a deconversion period where, just stumbling around trying to piece things together as my faith slipped away more and more until it was finally gone.
Right.
And I remember going through a bit of nihilism and thinking, what's the point to all of this? What is morality? And I had to build that back up from scratch.
Yeah.
But because I did that, it stuck with me better. It can't just be knocked aside because somebody says, oh, well, I think this. Oh, well, that sounds compelling, so I guess I'll think this now.
Yeah,
something that you learn on your own. sticks
Yeah.
with you better than something that you're told or something that just snaps one day.
I think it's healthy for people to evaluate their moral foundations like that. One of the last things I gave up as a theist, was that moral argument for God, thinking that he was the source of it all, at least before I thought about it. And then, the youth of road dilemma comes along and points out, actually, goodness is something that doesn't depend on a God at all. So, because that I came to that realization, I skipped the moral nihilism, and realized, it's actually objective not because it comes from a God, but because it would be beyond one, even if there is one. So I have a worldview that's compatible with the existence of gods, but it doesn't require one. And the way I see morality now is, it's at least based on objective reality, even if morality itself is not objective, because it has a subjective component. In other words, because morality is goal oriented, there has to be someone pursuing a goal. You could say that's the subjective side of it, but that goal has to be worked out in whatever reality you live in. So, it's an interaction between a subject and an object. That's how I see morality now.
On an aside, I guess I haven't had much. Just can't get into this kind of late, so I didn't have much to contribute. But I was wondering if everybody saw the last episode of the season of The Orville. If anybody else?
Yeah, I watched it just the day before yesterday. Which one was it?
With the planet that goes in and out, like it goes in
The 2D space thing.
Yeah, and it comes back like 700 years later, and it does it 3 times until finally the society on that planet evolves out of religion.
Well, I don't think I've seen that.
Nobody saw that?
No, I've been
No.
wanting to watch that show. I haven't gotten into it yet, but I've been wanting to watch it.
This
The last one I saw was where they went into 2D, into flatland.
Oh, that was one before it. This is the last
Okay.
one of the season, and Kelly, the first officer on the ship, makes contact with a primitive civilization on this planet and accidentally forms a religion. They accidentally form a religion there. So they leave, but this planet happens to go into a different dimension around this orbit. And when it comes back in its sight, it's 700 years later. So that now they're like medieval and they're worshiping Kelly until another 700 years later. There's some more plot involved, but they had evolved the civilization. And the way they explain it is that civilizations naturally evolve out of religion. Speaking about pushing a button and making everyone believe, it's pretty interesting. Obviously, the what's his name? The director of the show, the creator is
Seth MacFarlane.
Yeah.
I like that they are doing plots and subjects which are kind of like the original Star Trek series, where they're actually, exploring, the moral ideas and all these sorts of things. I don't think the series is all that well acted, or
Yeah, it's Star Trek with humor. I mean,
it's kind of bad. Seth MacFarlane keeps trying to inject the Family Guy jokes in there in the middle of what is a Star Trek show, and it's clumsy that way. But I do like that they are, approaching those subjects like the old series did. It's cool.
It's a fairly common trope, I think. I know I've seen it on The Simpsons, on Futurama. Just this rapidly evolving, starts as primitive civilization, goes through all the stages you'd expect, and usually they worship one of the characters of the show as a god until they move out of that phase.
Yeah, there's one on the Firefly where the guy named Jane was.
Oh yeah, Jane.
He became their god or their cult leader or something.
Until they realize.
Probably
I
something
shouldn't
Rick and Morty.
spoil.
They probably
They didn't.
Just to nerd out with you guys for a minute. Yeah, there was actually an episode of Star Trek Voyager where, even though it's not my favorite Star Trek series, there was an episode where the Starship Voyager got locked in orbit around a planet, and time was flowing much, much faster on the planet's surface. And their whole species culture revolved around, it wound up developing, worshiping this object in the sky that was Voyager. And eventually they found a way to send the holographic doctor down to the planet because he wouldn't age as a result of this. He's immune to aging. So they sent him down to the planet and as a way to communicate. It's a fascinating episode. I can't remember the episode title. It's a fascinating premise. It sounded similar to the Orville premise there. And eventually, because of their intervention and the curiosity of the inhabitants of this planet, they wind up advancing in just a few days or weeks' time. Their technology winds up advancing to the point where they can traverse that time barrier and help free Voyager, and so they can continue their trip home.
Well, of course, otherwise the series ends.
Yeah.
Have that.
Yeah, don't get me started on the ending. I actually prefer Deep Space. If we're going to talk about Star Trek, I actually prefer Deep Space Nine, even though I grew up with Next Generation. But
We're totally nerding out now.
Okay, tell you what, I have something. I have a thought that that kind of relates to the whole evolution of culture. Where I think I heard someone say, if there is a God and we evolved, maybe the God decided to let us evolve naturally without any intervention, precisely because he wanted to. He wanted us to be independent in a sense, or wanted us to develop naturally, because there's a certain beauty in the whole process of evolution by natural selection. And in that sense, it's kind of like, it's not like God created us, but that we're able to say that we created ourselves in a sense, collectively, or even individually, in the sense that, from a single cell, we, engage in mitosis, billions of times. But, yeah, it's kind of like, it's possible to imagine a God that kind of lets us progress naturally. And
Kind of the
intentionally
Hitchhiker's
does
Guide
it.
to the Galaxy scenario.
Yeah.
I guess my response to that is, so?
Yeah, and seems unlikely, but it's one idea.
I guess some people need that agency for things like morality. They feel they need that moral compass for the basis for the laws of logic. You've heard all this, Jordan. It's just, it's a placeholder.
If they want an explanation for why the universe is here, right?
Yeah, first cause. Yeah.
all right, well, that's kind of all the topics I was going to bring up for today. I mean, we can go a little longer. I know I scheduled it from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern, so we got about 8 minutes now. But we can go a little longer if you guys want. I mean, I'm kind of snowed and iced in right now, so I'm not going anywhere immediately.
Change the name to Star Trek Chat. You can carry on.
Sci-fi chat.
Well, you see, the shield frequency of the Enterprise allows the torpedoes to
Invert the polarity. That'll always fix something.
Or there's the infamous "it was all a dream" ending that Voyager liked to use.
What would you guys say is something that you hold deeply that you could help resonate yourself with the person you're interviewing? That if you
that's a good question.
That if you put yourself in their shoes, what is something that you really hold deeply, that if someone was to question you on it, that the tendency would be for you to get defensive, and that SE would be a good technique on you?
This is what I'm having problems with. I chatted with one guy from the page, and he wanted to practice, doing SE, and so did I. But I'm like, I don't really use faith for a belief, and every time he asks me what's your belief, even just using the word belief is kind of loaded. So there's it just has that ring to it where it's something that only I believe or something. But the only thing I can come up with is back to science, sci-fi again, is like aliens. Yeah, I believe there's aliens out there in a different planet. So, and then he tried to practice that with me, and like any theist, I can't really get anywhere with that belief. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, there's some technologies identifying new planets, blah blah.
No, I mean like a belief that has an emotional component for you personally, that your gut instinct would be to lash out and protect that belief. Like aliens and the shape of the earth, as I sometimes use, these are not emotional topics for us.
Right.
Yeah, it's tied to what you value, right?
Yeah.
So like I would like to throw one out there for you. Like let's say I'm guessing here, but I'm guessing most people in this Google Hangout don't like Trump much.
Good guess.
Here we go.
And my guess is that if on certain political topics, it would be very easy for one of us to get defensive and lash out when pressed on certain specific claims about Trump. And I say this as a way to, the next time we're the interviewer, to keep this in the back of your mind, like this, maybe the love the person has for Jesus might be the same as the hate you have for Trump.
Sure.
They are, in fact, one and the same.
Wait. I think I've actually got a good one, because this has happened to me several times recently. I believe that SE is a force for good. I believe that it's very helpful and is a good way forward. And I get very defensive when my friends try to attack me on that.
That's a good example. It's something that.
Who knocks you on that? I didn't catch your name. Who gives you backlash against SE? Because whenever I bring up to somebody just in conversation, like, what's the point of doing that? Why do you bother people with their beliefs or whatever?
Yeah. There's a variety of things that they bring up. One of them is the morality of doing SE, like we brought up earlier. Like, even if this belief isn't true for this person, why do you want to take it away from them if it gives them comfort? What gives you the right to do that? Then I'll have people coming up to me going, well, I think it's very arrogant of you to assume that you should be doing this at all. How dare you think that it's the right thing to inspire doubt in people and make them question themselves? Are you saying that you know better than them?
Yeah, that's what I get from a couple of people that I've talked to about it at work and stuff. Like, say similar train of thought.
Yeah, we don't really expect someone to change their minds on the existence of God just by talking with them. But at the same time, we entertain it anyway because we at least intellectually acknowledge that we could have something still to learn about it.
I have a friend who runs. It's kind of like a cult, but he has no followers. But he runs an online kind of.
It's really cool.
I'm going to one of those.
I'm not sure that qualifies as a cult, in fact.
Well, he has all the answers, and he pretty much knows where the end of the world is coming in. But anyways, I tried it with him, and God, nowhere. I mean, this is actually pretty early when I first started watching the SE videos, or whatever. But I got nowhere with him, man. I mean, he can't do a mind experiment. He can't answer intellectually honest. You know what I mean? And he's just battling, and he, he runs this like a little parish or something in Virginia, and it's like an online thing. It's pretty bizarre. But I couldn't get anywhere with him.
Don't the cult of one people tend to be conspiracy theorists? And aren't we like specifically discouraged from trying to interact with them?
He subscribes to every conspiracy. He says he's not a Christian, but he preaches from the Bible with his own crazy interpretation. And he subscribes to pretty much all the conspiracies out there. Yeah, I don't think he's a flat.
I wouldn't even bother trying to use SC on somebody like that. It's just a waste of your time. You'd be better off, working on other people who you're more likely to have some success with. Because I see applying SE as a worldwide goal. I mean, you could sit there and pound away at one guy for 5-10 hours and never make a difference, or you could take that time and get 15
Plant
college
bubbles.
students to
Yeah.
and those guys will grow up and run the world, and that really will make a difference. So.
Well, I remember seeing, I want to say a Vox video the other day, just on why you shouldn't try to debate or even have like a logical discussion of any kind with a conspiracy theorist, because that mentality feeds itself more than any kind of fundamentalist belief. Because whatever you present to them, they're going to find a way to say that it's part of the conspiracy.
But just as a
Even if
practical
it
matter.
seems like incontrovertible proof.
Right. So just as a practical matter, just don't waste your time. That's the way I see it anyway.
He's shown to me anyway. So
Welcome, Ocean. Good to have you here.
And also welcome. Is it Staja? I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. We had Staja from Poland join as well.
Yeah, my name is not Stasia.
Oh yeah, we got several people who joined.
You're very, very quiet.
Very, very quiet. I'm so sorry. Maybe I will go for microphone. 1 second.
I'm doing a sound check real quick. How am I coming in?
You're good.
You're coming in good, Ocean.
Yeah.
And I apologize for not giving you the link to the Hangout earlier. I wasn't paying much attention to the chat at that point.
Oh, I was mad in the chat.
You were mad at the chat?
Yeah, I think he was.
I was angry.
I think Ocean was getting frustrated with you, Jordan, because of your Euthyphro dilemma that you were discussing earlier.
Oh, I did not see your response to that. What was that about?
You said that the Euthyphro dilemma demonstrates that that God has nothing to do with morality, when that ignores the half of the dilemma that says that God has entirely to do with morality.
Yeah, it was poorly phrased. Yeah, but my resolution to the Euthyphro dilemma, even as a theist, was that morality had to be something even God, would be subject to, basically. That was my resolution.
That's the sacrificing omnipotence angle of the Euthyphro dilemma. If you take that position, then God is no longer omnipotent, so it's not the Christian God anymore. The divine command theory at least still obeys the definition.
Yeah, I was okay with that, because I don't, especially now, I'm okay with God's having limits. So,
I mean, same. But I don't take the position of objective morality. But I'm a polytheist. But somebody was the reason why I wanted to come in. Someone mentioned some of the problems with SE when people bring up objections to just the idea of it. My experience with it is that there tends to be kind of a smugness with street epistemology when people are practicing it, that I find to be I find to be frustrating whenever I'm dealing with it. That the person that's controlling the questions has an air about them of suggesting they have all the answers or something like that.
I've gotten that feedback a lot from.
It's a legitimate gripe, and I think it's a fair gripe.
You're probably very right.
It's something that some of us are consciously we want to avoid, coming across.
Yeah, we're trying. We're just not always very effective.
I've found that street epistemology will work against people that, maybe haven't thought out their beliefs entirely, but it doesn't work well against two situations. One being that when you're dealing with somebody who's not interested in having an honest conversation, or somebody that has dealt with the philosophical angle of what they're approaching. Like if it's street epistemology would not work well against somebody who's on the level of an apologist. Like if you did street epistemology with somebody like Craig, I don't think it would go very well, or somebody like Plantinga.
Right.
I don't know. I think that relates to your first part about them needing to engage honestly.
I think that those guys would probably engage honestly. I think Plantinga would. Maybe not. Maybe not Craig, but
I don't think they would. That's the problem, or at least they wouldn't take a breath in order to do that. And I think what
I think they would think they
is,
were engaging honestly. I'm just not sure they would be.
Yes, I'm confused. Are you assuming they wouldn't engage honestly because they're theist, or why don't you think they would engage honestly?
I think.
Go ahead. That kind of street preacher.
I see it as
Plantinga's a philosopher. He's not a street preacher.
Oh gosh, you said
Craig is a
I think you said
philosopher
William Lane Craig. Yeah. It's just I've heard some of these guys engage with the hosts on the Atheist Experience before, and they like you mentioned, like sorry, somebody else mentioned a minute ago, they don't really take a breath.
Right.
Like there's no
They're-
time for self-reflection in that if you are just putting it out, putting it out, putting it out.
I think you're talking about
Right.
people like
They're
Slick,
so
which I agree
busy
with you on
doing
that.
they're so busy doing their shtick that they don't actually stop
Yeah.
and consider your question, openly and honestly.
Because their careers are based on defending the faith. It's kind of like they're not in a position to be completely honest if they're backed into a corner.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know. I think that there's a certain amount of it where it's not. There's aspects you can take on theism where you're not backed into a corner with these kind of questions. I did a street epistemology thing on Steve's channel just recently. I didn't feel like I was painted into a corner at any point, and it didn't. There wasn't really much effectivity coming from it. I
I
the
saw that.
questions that
And
were asked didn't.
I thought that was a good example of how it's not that SE is even from the atheist. It's not even about like challenging theism, but trying to just get people to reflect on why they believe. And like one of the enemies that we could say that the enemy to SE is dogmatism. And since you don't have that, we're totally fine with your polytheism, like where it's like, yeah, he believes that. That's cool. And he like you've already acknowledged that you could be wrong. And it's like, yeah, you've already thought about this.
Right, but I think that's a position that as an atheist you should have as well, that you could be wrong.
Exactly.
But when you have somebody that's here's the problem that I have is when you start talking about like degree of certainty, and this we addressed this in the conversation I had with Steve early on, is when you talk about degree of certainty. Whenever someone assigns any number, like if I asked any of you guys, what's your degree of certainty of the existence of God or gods? Whenever you assign a number to that, I don't know how you're quantifying it. I have no idea. And
I don't think I would personally.
Well, you would have some idea though. If you're saying someone gives you a scale of 0 to 100, and someone says my degree of certainty is 99%,
right?
You're not going to assume that. Oh, I can't understand how you quantify your numbers, and that to you 99% could be equivalent to 0.0001.
Where I understand where numbers come from. That's not the objection. It's where they're getting the figure.
Yeah, I think what he's saying is it's
That's
difficult to quantize certain things on the belief knowledge landscape. Like Dr. Alex Malpass has a wonderful blog on use of reason where he does actually show that if you start off with a middle position, agnostic 50-50 position, then you will either land yourself one side or the other toward theism or atheism as a belief position, which is what you call the penumbra. And then after that, then you start getting into the knowledge type on the landscape. But I think it's difficult to just throw out a quantified number when you ask somebody how certain you are of this belief, because people don't usually think in those terms. They don't usually think in, okay, I'm only half certain of this term. Or only
I don't have a number that I would apply.
Yeah,
but I'm a believer.
Right. They don't push that though. They don't say you have to give a number.
What if you made a better wager? What if you put somebody's life on it? Would you be willing to give your life for your belief?
Well, I don't know what the odds would be.
But that's not a quantification though.
But if they're willing to give up their life for something that they believe in, then that would infer that they hold that belief very tightly.
Right, but they're
willing to end their existence on the planet for it.
But they're still making a belief. They're saying that the proposition that if I do something to prevent this from happening, that this life will, continue. They're saying that's true. I believe that to be true. I think it's very difficult to put numbers on how much you think a proposition to be true is or not.
Right. Okay. So the whole. Sorry. Go ahead, Christine.
It's okay. I think of it in terms of how willing are you to entertain doubt, to entertain the possibility that you might be wrong.
Right. It has more to do with just It really, the whole point of the belief scale thing was not to try to put it on a number necessarily, but just to get a general idea of how confident you are. Just, are you really sure? Are you slightly sure? And just get an idea of that, and then only use that as something to compare a subsequent question about the same thing when you're done. So then after you're done, you say, okay, now how sure are you? It's a relative value. Are you less sure than you were, or are you more sure than you were? You're not really trying to put a number on it, because obviously it can't be.
Again, like how sure is something that I don't like there's arguments in favor of it, and I agree with them.
Listen to me.
But I don't know how you would quantify.
The point, you don't have to quantify it. The point is that it's relative value. Are you more or less than you were?
Same problem. Like
what you don't have to know what a number is to know that it's more than something else, right?
Yeah, you could use fuzzy
like a
logic
game
to say
scale.
that. Sure, you don't have to put a numeric value to use fuzzy logic.
Right.
I think it's whether or not I agree with the argument, or if I don't agree with the argument. If you wound up convincing me away from the argument, then I guess that whatever certainty level that there is, if you could even quantify one, or even if there is one, might go down.
Right.
But even also, I wouldn't describe a level of certainty in that conversation. It's either you agree with arguments or you don't agree.
And that's totally fine because honestly, there's really no science behind that, or no certainty behind it, or no confidence in its value. It's really just kind of see if I've actually had an effect or not, or maybe get a general idea. Maybe I had an effect. I don't know. It's just sort of feedback for the SE to kind of get a feeling as to whether what they're doing is having an effect. That's all it was ever meant to be.
It's also a good way of determining whether it's a conversation worth having. Like Anthony likes to say at the beginning, take a drink of your coffee, Tim. As Anthony likes to say at the beginning of a lot of his videos, the stronger beliefs are usually the more interesting conversations. So if somebody believes in something, like, I'm only 35% sure this is true, that's probably not going to be as interesting or productive a dialogue for SE as somebody who says, oh, I am 100% sure this is true. Just no room for doubt. There's no chance that I could be wrong about this.
I think that SE would be ineffective when people say there's a 100% chance of anything when it comes to a knowledge claim. And that's one of the problems I have with the Dawkins scale. He actually takes what would be a strong position, like a strong atheist or strong theist, and actually puts it as 100% certain. And that's not what knowledge is. You don't have to have certainty or Cartesian certainty to have knowledge. And I think that's a problem. When somebody says, I know something, they're not saying that I know absolutely. They're saying that I know within whatever their epistemic framework they choose to have.
Well,
but
some of them are, but some of them are actually saying, I definitely know with 100% total.
Some of them,
yeah, there are a few.
I think that's not just like an atheist saying, I know that gods do not exist. I think it's just as silly as a theist saying, I know that gods exist with the same, like 100% certitude kind of thing. It's not something that's demonstrable.
I don't have a problem asserting them as knowledge, as long as they're not making a certain knowledge.
But with me, where I was thinking that the conversation would be interesting is that it's a belief that I have in which I base several decisions in my life on. That there's goals that I have that are associated with it, et cetera, et cetera. Whether or not, like how certain I am this is necessarily something that figures into that. It's whether or not I agree with it, which is kind of fairly binary.
Yeah, you either do or don't.
Right. It's either you agree with the arguments or you do not agree with the arguments. And I happen to agree with the arguments, and then I do things, therefore, as a result of agreeing those arguments. With atheists, there's certain arguments that they agree with, and they do things in their life, therefore, from agreeing with those arguments. They don't establish any relationship with gods because they agree with arguments that suggest that there is no gods.
But are you saying that you don't see any grayscale of certainty when it comes to beliefs that you have that you may have varying levels of evidence for? Like you still see all that as binary? It's either total or not?
You either agree with it or you do not agree with it. Unless you know of another option. I don't know where it would be.
It is binary.
Like, I'm partially convinced, but I'm not fully convinced, and I could be persuaded otherwise.
Right, but do you agree with it or not?
Yeah, the agreement is binary. Either you do accept or you don't. Now, if you don't accept it, that doesn't mean that you absolutely reject it. You cannot accept a proposition at the same time not be in a situation where you're rejecting the proposition. But when it comes to what Ocean's saying, yes, you either do accept the argument or you do not accept the argument. That is an actual dichotomy.
That would be binary. Yes, yes.
Well, let's say we're talking about the innocence of a man in court, and you're on the jury. Mm-hmm. And it's the beginning of the trial, and you look at this guy and you have a feeling about whether he's guilty or innocent. And then the trial goes on, you get more and more evidence one way or another. You become more and more certain, you have less and less doubt of whichever direction you're going in. And you could, if you wanted to get a clear view of your opinion changing, you could quantify that with a number It would be a subjective number, but you would get an idea as it goes up or goes down. Does that make more sense?
But you either
accept it or you don't.
Not. Yeah. You still eventually reach a point where if I say P, the defendant is guilty, I have to put a truth value to that, either true or false or not evaluate it.
And that's the reason why they
Yeah,
say
but
guilty,
don't
innocent.
the points in between matter?
Not really.
Like, wouldn't you want
not in a
to
jury
see
case.
that?
Yeah, not in what Ocean's saying, not the way he's actually describing it, which is the correct way to look at the proposition here. Because you're saying he's guilty, right? He did the crime, or you're saying that he's not guilty, which doesn't necessarily mean he didn't do the crime. That's a different thing in the law situation.
Yeah.
But you're saying is either he's guilty or he's not. There's no other way to look at that. You give the judge your final thing. Say yes.
There's no grayscale. The jury doesn't say.
If I were a lawyer, I would want to have an idea of whether or not I was convincing the jury, moving them up or down the confidence scale of what I was talking about.
Wouldn't they all?
So that would be my way of quantifying
No,
it.
I kind of disagree with Ocean a little bit. I mean, I do think you can lean one way or another. I do think there's leanings, right? But when it comes down to it, either you do accept or you don't.
Right. Before you come to the conclusion of agreement, then there's leanings.
Yeah.
I'm just saying there's
I have
a
not
use in the
concluded
number
is
scale for
definitely
me as I'm looking
might
at
be a
it.
third answer, but let's saying I have not concluded might be a third answer, but then you either agree or you don't as far as when you take a position on something.
Right.
Like from the perspective that I'm sitting, I agree with certain arguments, so that's the agreement. That's what the street epistemology would be arguing with in my case, is the agreement with the argument. Try to come up with a way in order to make me disagree with it by providing alternative arguments or poking holes in the arguments that I hold agreement to.
Which is a fair approach. That's why one of the reasons I really like street epistemology.
I don't find street epistemology doing that. What I find them doing is
I binge watch his videos. I see him doing it quite frequently. I don't know. I don't watch anybody else, so I don't know how.
Watching whose videos?
I watch Anthony's.
Oh, Anthony. Yeah, Anthony.
I really like
what Anthony does is he tries to insert doubt in a kind of an interesting way, which I think that's kind of the goal of street epistemology, is try to insert doubt into it but it works. Again, it works well with somebody who hasn't really thought it through entirely, by saying that, I know this because of, experience X, and then when you try and cast doubt on experience X, then they're like, well, maybe I'm not 100% certain, which is a dumb position in the first place. So you can argue them out of the dumb position.
Well, that's the criticism I initially had. And I still kind of have. That's one of the things we'll be talking about, is that, one, I agree with Ozzy. I don't think the word doubt should be used in street epistemology. And we're going to explain why, because it's not really the word that I think that they're really looking for, but they're just using it as a stipulative definition differently.
I mean, it's a conversion tactic to develop.
Yeah, it is.
Doubt is disbelief. Is that kind of the definition we're working off of?
I wouldn't say
it's doubt is disbelief. You have Christians that doubt, and that's fine. Or you can have, as polytheists.
Yeah, and disbelief is kind of a vague term, because disbelief can be defined many different ways, one of which would be you do not believe something, or that you actively hold the belief contrary. So it's kind of a vague word that you'll see out there. Right. But the other thing is that, like Joshin was saying, there are people that may actually be justified from a non-evidential point of view with things like pragmatism or potentialism to have a belief and be fully justified to hold it, even if the evidence is against it. Because the one criticism I have against street epistemology, and I brought it up to Anthony quite a few times, is that it's very heavily focused in empiricism, right? You want empirical ways to show that the belief should not be held or is not justified. And that's fine from one particular aspect, but there are other ways to justify beliefs. And I think that SE may needs to expand to incorporate those other forms of justificatory ways of holding a belief.
For example?
Well, prudentialism would be something along the lines that it's prudential for me to have the belief that a certain experimental medicine that hasn't really been fully tested appropriately is going to save my life, because I need to support my wife and my kids. Therefore, it's been studied that people have positive thoughts with these things tend to do better. So even if the drug doesn't have evidence that it's going to save my life, it's prudential for me to hold the belief that it will because of the outcome. It's a consequentialist type argument. But evidentially, that argument would be flawed. That's why I don't hold a Clifford's principle, and I'm not an evidentialist for that very reason. There are other examples, but
also trying to bring empiricism into a conversation about spirituality is
difficult.
It brings in a category problem because it's not talking about empiricism. It's not an empirical claim.
Right.
Right.
I understand that perspective a lot better than I used to. Yeah.
And that's a really good point, though. When people talk about spiritualism, they're not positing God from a scientific point of view, right? And I think it's difficult to treat that claim as if they're positing it as an evidence-based claim. And if they do, great, have at it, right?
There's some evidence that's not empirical evidence. Like the evidence can be used. Like there's philosophical evidence, argumentation evidence, experiential evidence, literature evidence, archaeological evidence.
Oh, I agree. It's
not going to be an empirical claim. It's that you're not going to be able to suss it out from an empirical position because it doesn't capture that aspect of it.
Right.
When you have a God with agency and you try and put experiments on it, and it can either do one way. If you assume that the God has will, then either option is going to be a result. Like people that make an argument against prayer. Well, prayer sometimes doesn't work, therefore there are no gods or something like that. If prayer worked all the time, it wouldn't be an entity with agency. It would be a mechanism and therefore not a god. Exactly. So the fact that prayer doesn't work sometimes or does work sometimes or whatever it is that you want to assign it to is consistent with the claim.
And that's why I don't think the unanswered or the prayer argument is a good argument to use.
That's a terrible argument.
Yeah, it really is. And that's another thing that we're going to be talking about, some bad atheist arguments. And I want atheists to have better arguments. I'm an agnostic. I want atheists. I will lean slightly to their side, obviously, because I'm very much pro-science. Pseudoscience has got to go. But I think that there's better arguments to be used against theist claims and which the position the theist is positing, rather than these really poor basal type arguments, such as like the prayer argument. As Ocean said, I find that to be a very poor argument because the expectation of what we would have is consistent about what they were positing. So it's not something to be used as negative evidence against them, unfortunately.
I haven't heard the word used yet, but like the reason why I don't put a number on, the certainty, for example, I don't use the scale at all, but the way I kind of interpret it is that atheism, I think, is more parsimonious than theism.
What do you mean?
Well, what do you mean by that?
Can you unpack that?
And by the way, you have the best radio voice, man. You need to go into radio. If you're not already.
Yeah, this mic is brand new. This is the first time I'm using it.
He's got a mic with a good reverb.
Is that what it is? It's this mic envy. Got it. Okay.
He's got one of those magic mics.
Yeah, that's great.
Nice. Yeah, it's brand new, so I'm glad it's working out. But as far as like parsimony, it's kind of like making as few assumptions as are necessary to account for the experience.
Well, what are we accounting for? See, the thing with parsimony, when you apply the law of parsimony,
I might respond to that, Steve, with polytheism. I think polytheism makes less assumptions than atheism does, or at least it makes the same amount. I think that with polytheism, you're looking at a number of experiences across the world where there's no reason to dismiss those experiences unless you have a good reason to suggest that it is something other than what is described. And if it is not something other than what is described, then polytheism is the case. So in order to be an atheist, you would need to argue against those positions and say that there's a good reason to dismiss all of these experiences.
This feels like it's turning into an atheism versus theism discussion.
And that's what street epistemology is. Ultimately, you're trying to get atheists. Come on now.
That's the name of Peter's book, but I didn't read the book.
The problem is with parsimony is that usually you apply the law of parsimony when you're talking about two competing hypotheses that have equal explanatory and predictive power, right? And I don't think theism and atheism both have the same power. In fact, atheism, I don't know if it has any power, but I think, obviously, I'm not a big fan of the God claim for positing certain things, right? People do posit God for the most ridiculous things. Like you've all ran into Darwin's deity. You've seen his shtick,
right?
Laws of logic and all that stuff, right? And it has to be an accountability for these things. It's just absurd. But you have to be you have to say, okay, what is it we're observing? What are we trying to find a explanation for? Then you apply the law of parsimony.
I'll tell you what, Steve. I might jump into one of your hangouts on the GDC and talk about that some more, because I think that'd be interesting to
join the Discord. We've been trying to get people on there.
Yeah, Ocean just set up the Discord for us. We're expanding. I'm starting a podcast, and we're going big time in 2018. So the more the merrier. And I've been promoting street epistemology, as you guys know. I've been bringing Anthony on my channel. The podcast that he had with me and Ozzy was the highest I think he's had. I really enjoyed that conversation. I want to continue it. I like the way Anthony's trying to take straight epistemology and moving it out of just the, oh, let's get rid of religion thing, because I'm not a big fan of that for various reasons.
Right.
But he's trying to make it into a methodological approach. And I think that's the most brilliant way to do it.
Yeah, that's a good evolution for it. Like, I think that if you use it against people, I think that the what's his face that wrote the book has just as much frustration with with extreme ends of political theory as well. When you get into like the hard left or the hard right, there's aspects of those ideologies that have religious components. There is similar components to religion as far as certainty is concerned, and on that level, straight epistemology can be useful in trying to engage those people. And show them that their dogmatic approach to politics is like
harmful
religion, right?
Yeah.
Well, hey, I know we're going over a bit, but I did want to give Staja from Poland, who's been quiet. I think he was having some microphone issues. He put in the chat he had some info to share from across the ocean from us, because I think the rest of us are based in the U.S. Or so, Staja, did you want to chime in before we wrap things up? Your audio is coming in very, very low, very soft, and we can barely hear you. It doesn't sound much. Doesn't sound any different to me. You might want to check the input source on your Hangouts.
Put the mic closer to your face than the other side of the house.
Hey, Ocean.
See, I don't think that's being used as your input source, because when you're tapping that mic, we're not hearing anything.
Yeah, we're not hearing anything from the mic.
Yeah, some other mic is being used.
It might be using like the built-in computer mic or something.
Yeah, it seems like he's got like a laptop set up and his mic is like nearby.
If you click the gear setting, the gear button in the Hangouts window, there should be one of those options will change which microphone you're using. If you've got a multiple mic set up.
Yeah, he says he needs a second down in the side chat.
Okay, so Ocean, your comments about the belief scale earlier, I think just to kind of tie back in something that came up really early in the conversation before you joined. We were discussing like somebody made a comment about Anthony being like a cult leader or a kind of like any kind of de facto.
I think he rings of being a cult leader a little bit. He's got that image about him.
So why do you ask? I was just curious, like why.
Right.
How confident you are in that belief. Just to be a little cheeky there. I'm just filling some time.
I want to hear the argument.
It's a feeling I got. Like I've met some cult leaders, and they have this like kind of like calm. He reminds me of like the Heaven's Gate guy a little bit. You know what I mean? Like it's just that calm, soft-spoken, smiley sort of attitude where it's just it bothers me. It creeps me out. I mean, I'm sure he's a nice guy and everything, but it's. I don't know. Having a conversation with him,
because he's unobtrusive. You're thinking
about the third hour.
Because he's kind of mellow and unassuming. Okay, that's how it works, I guess. Now, because you're a nice guy, you're a cult leader. Okay,
he's a nice person. It's just that it's
really how do you define a cult leader?
That is like I don't know, some of his earlier videos a little bit more contentious, or it's like, oh, okay, so he does have some red blood in him, but.
I think he's mellowed out a little bit. I think he's found definitely his even keel, and I respect him for that.
He's either calmed down or he's had so many of these conversations that he's just gone numb.
He's just on lewds every time he does them.
Yeah, I don't know, but
probably drinks a lot. I don't know.
He just seems like, but especially I've watched a couple of the Street Epistemology Hangouts. There's one guy in particular. God, I forget his name, but he doesn't have any emotional expression on his face ever. And he does a Street Epistemology.
Are you talking about Reed? He's often called the Spock of SE.
I think it is Reed.
And the SE poker face.
Right. It's not even poker face with him. He's just a statue that talks occasionally. And I've been confused by him.
I think the goal there is you're trying to be as impartial as possible, and you're not. Maybe you're trying not to influence the interlocutor. And
he doesn't want to influence them.
Yeah, you can't act biased. Like you really believe.
To me, though, if you're engaging with somebody, I want to feel like I'm engaging with a human being. That's a personal preference, but like I feel like when I'm talking, like street epistemology seems to be in the case of Anthony and this Reed guy, it's like removing as much of yourself from the conversation as possible, making the conversation as much about the interlocutor. And fine, yeah, I see the point in that, in which you're trying to get them to think as much as possible. But if you give somebody something to read off of a little bit, that there's at least a warmness to it, I think there could be better results. I don't know. But
Yeah.
I feel like...
Well, I see what you're saying, but I think also then you run the risk of coming across as
yeah, you risk inserting bias or something like
that. You coming across as smug or condescending. If you're just doing the somebody called it the SE bobblehead, where you're just like yeah.
Yeah, it's a fine line. I mean, anytime you have these types of conversations, it's a fine line that you're walking. There's no question about that.
When I showed Anthony's videos to my friends who are not involved in SE, the ones they respond most positively to are the ones where he's being warm and inquisitive and seems genuinely interested in the interlocutor's opinions, and starts indicating that he has his own feeling about what they're talking about. When he starts pushing his own idea, even indirectly, that's when they turn off and go, oh, no, I don't want to watch any more of this. I don't like that guy. But they're positive about SE until they see that happen. So I think he's trying to cultivate more of what they're responding positively to.
I think there's a differentiation between the warmness aspect and showing no emotion. There's a statue kind of thing that sometimes happens with street epistemology, which is what I'm criticizing. That if you have a warmness about you and a genuine curiosity that you can display while you're going with your interlocutor, then sure, I think that's effective. Because then you're demonstrating interest and you're getting them to talk a little bit more. It's like it's building a rapport with the person that you're talking to without inserting any of your own opinion and therefore bias.
That can also be hard to cultivate for those of us that aren't naturally socially inclined, like me.
I think you probably shouldn't be
it's a skill set
tactic based on social interaction.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point though. I mean, it's not to be condescending, but yeah, if you're out there talking to somebody, you do have to have a social rapport with somebody, and social rapport is not easy. Even we do it online. Even right now, what we're doing has a social aspect to it. Now, can you imagine how much worse that is when you're out on the street talking to people? And I have planned to try something like this. Not street epistemology. We're doing something other, but it's along the same lines. But it's not evaluating people's beliefs, trying to change their beliefs. But I'm used to being out there with people. I was in retail for 20 years. I've worked with the public. It is a skill set you develop. Not everybody has that skill set initially, but you know what? It's something you can develop.
Yeah, you can develop it. I worked in sales.
Look at Ocean. He used to be an antisocial person like you wouldn't believe. Nobody liked him.
Well, and I know for me personally, and I was sharing this earlier in the pre Hangout banter, and I'll just disclose this. I was recently diagnosed on the autism spectrum, and I guess that kind of explains why a lot of people say that I'm very emotionless and I have difficulty making eye contact, and I tend to come across with a flat tone of voice. I don't have that silky, buttery Jordan or Seth Andrews Blue Gorilla Grape Ape microphone empowered.
Wow, you just compared me to Seth Andrews?
Well, yeah.
I think, Jordan, you just have a microphone that increases the sexiness of your voice tenfold. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Use promo code OCEAN when ordering your magic microphone.
This was a good purchase.
I have another mic, but I'm not using
Holy
it.
Cow.
But no, so it's often something I often wrestle with in my delivery, and why I tend to do these exchanges more over the internet, because I can sometimes misread intent, or I have difficulty. It's almost like I feel like I'm faking the emotion if I try to show the emotion. It's not that I don't have.
I've actually seen some of Anthony's interactions before where it is almost like he's exaggerating the amount of interest he has in the beliefs that his interlocutors come up with.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. That shows a vain amount of interest, and people catch on to that.
Sometimes they do. Yeah.
I know we've gone to almost half an hour over, so we need to I need to wrap this up soon. I appreciate everybody for joining. It's been a great conversation, but
I've got to go to a Christmas party.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to end the topic on was, after the last Hangout video, I actually had this kind of dovetails into the warmness or the I guess the veneer you're showing when you're dialoguing. Excuse me. When after the last Hangout, that was the first time I kind of appeared publicly as involved on the internet, as putting my face out there with SE. I'm still not really openly atheist with much of my friends or family. But I suppose they stumble on this, the cat's out of the bag now. But I actually had an interesting conversation. A colleague of mine from my college days reached out to me directly on Facebook Messenger, and I hadn't heard from this. I'm not going to name him because it was a private conversation, so I'm not going to exactly quote him or anything. I'll just kind of give the gist of it. But he, I hadn't heard from him in quite some time. I'd followed him on Facebook, but he's apparently an apologist now, and his wife's an apologist as well. And he reached out to me saying, "Hey, man, are you like an atheist now? Are you involved in SE?" And he was, I mean, it was coming across as showing concern, but at the same time, I was a bit frustrated because I'm like, so when you thought I shared your beliefs, you didn't want to engage with me. I don't know. Maybe I'm assuming, misreading intent there, but it's not just our side that can come across a certain way as well. That's the only reason I wanted to bring up that story.
Did you have a very religious background, Tim?
Oh yeah, I was raised. I mean, I'm not going to go into this. Isn't the story of Tim show or anything, but the quick and dirty version of it. I was raised Southern Baptist. My grandfather was a Southern Baptist minister, and I was very much young Earth creationist. Far right, super religious. We went to church multiple days a week, every time the doors were opened, and then I got exposed to like Church of Christ and some Pentecostal denominations as my father moved around and all that. So,
all your crew was likely the same way, and that's why they found out.
Yeah, and I imagine the video got shared in some apologist circles, and maybe that's where he saw me, because I'm sure he knows some of the apologists that watch these hangouts. But I just thought it was interesting that he felt the need to reach out to me out of concern over that, because he's like, he said something about like, we're no longer on the same side. And I said, well, dude, I don't consider you an enemy. I mean, but anyway, so I appreciate everybody for joining. I know we're kind of wrapping it up. Stajo, did I see you rejoin? Or no, that's somebody else.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, hey. Is that Lezek? Is that how you pronounce that?
Yeah. Can you hear me right now?
Yeah. Hi, Lezek. How are you doing?
Okay, so few words explaining. Sorry for my English. I'm from Poland. I'm still learning. My name is Leszek Nowak. The Stasia atheism, that hard word, the last green logo you saw, the circle, is our show like the atheist experience in Poland.
Oh, okay.
I'm one of the hosts. We are called Stacja Ateizm in Polish, which means atheism station, directly translated.
Okay.
And right now we don't have English subtitles, unfortunately, but we're working on it. And I have some very good info from Poland for all of you guys. Because in next year there will be finally translation of Peter Bogosian's book. We wait for that, and recently the first ever in Polish interview with topic like street epistemology. In Polish is Epistemologia uliczna, and that when you type that two Polish words in YouTube, right now there are only two films about epistemology in Poland. Interview with me, and the other one is interview with other guy. So we are happy to promote epistemology in Poland. We are making our show weekly, like the Atheist Experience, which is huge inspiration for us. I am responsible for making for our hosts and co-hosts lessons and training and workshops of things like street epistemology, counter-apologetics, etc. But the SE is the heart of our project, and I get a lot of good messages and mails from believers who are watching us that we are doing a good job, we don't criticize, we are not harsh, we just analyze and not criticize people's beliefs, and this is very gold feedback for us. And I'm glad to hear that Anthony is making his way to Europe. I heard that he will be in Germany. This is the closest to Poland I found on his tour.
Yeah.
And I wonder if right now anybody here is anyhow connected with Poland. Do you have any Poland relatives? Are you sometimes in Poland? I will be glad to meet any one of you in Poland in face.
Well, first of all, thanks for joining, and I'm glad you finally were able to get the audio issues sorted out. And it's great to hear that SE is getting some exposure overseas, and it's not just a U.S. thing. So that's always good to hear.
Definitely.
Yeah, I know Anthony had been to Europe before. Was he there earlier this year for like a key?
Yeah, he was in England, but next year he will be in Germany. So
yeah, I saw that.
One step closer to Poland. I'm very glad to hear that. Yeah.
Well,
Awesome.
yeah. As far I don't have any Polish ancestry or anything like that I'm aware of, or any connections. I've never even left the U.S. I would love to go to Europe if time and money and work allows. I know my former stepmother actually had some Polish ancestry, so I got kind of spoiled on having some homemade pierogies and Polish sausages that were quite tasty. But it's a country I'd love to visit, along with some other parts of Europe. But I don't know if Christine or Ed, you wanted to chime in and respond to Leszek's question there before we wrap up.
I don't have any Polish ties, unfortunately, but I love hearing about atheism and street epistemology in other countries. So if you're part of the FC group, by all means, feel very encouraged to post, because I love reading about that stuff. I like hearing about the differences in how it impacts in other countries.
Yeah, that
in Poland we have a very big problem with Catholic Church. In statistic, we hear numbers like that. 92% of Polish people are Catholic, but they are baptized and nothing else. We have huge problem because the Catholic priests and archbishops are writing legal political papers. I don't remember the word. Bills, etc. And we are starting to making citizens movement for making finally our country as secular as the constitution say. For now, our constitution is secular, but reality is completely different, and people are getting the difference, are seeing it so clearly, more and more. And I think the next vote for our government will be the huge step forward for making the Poland secular country, as constitution says. But we have big problem. Our show, Atheism Station, a live calling show every Sunday at 6 p.m. is the only project like that. I don't think that in Europe there is any second. I heard that Czech Republic are in contact with Texas too. We are in contact with Texas, obviously. But Czech Republic asked, but I don't hear any progress in that matter. I wait for any other show like our in Europe. If you will know anybody, I will be glad to contact them. And today, I want to share the info that in Poland there are atheists, there are SE fans and huge fans. I'm one of them. I'm in contact with Polish translator of Peter Bogosia's book. The next year will be released, and I will be glad for making a promotion for Polish version of that book.
That's wonderful.
Well, that's good to hear. And yeah, that leads me into the segue before we close. I just want to give a quick plug to the various street epistemology Facebook groups. There's the SE private study group. There's the Let's Learn Street Epistemology public group. And then there's the Chat with a Street Epistemologist group where you can actually practice and engage in SE exercises or role play. So all those descriptions, or all those groups should be linked in the description below. But yeah, Leszek, feel free if you're involved. I think I've seen your name on some of those Facebook posts, so feel free to keep us informed there. And it's a little, I don't want to say comforting, but it's glad to hear that the United States isn't the only country that's struggling with certain forms of fundamentalism creeping into the government. I think there's a bit of a misconception that all Europe is just some secular monolithic block, where you may have some strongly secular countries like Sweden or some of the other Scandinavian countries, but there's definitely still a bit of that. Now, it's interesting though that you said Poland is more Roman Catholic dominated, whereas in the U.S. it's definitely more Protestant dominated. And also in the U.S. it gets kind of interesting because depending on what side or what region of the U.S. you are, I'm located in southeastern United States, so it's definitely very heavily fundamentalist and like a lot of Southern Baptists, a lot of Methodists and other denominations. But on the West Coast, it might be a different story, or in the Northeast.
Yeah,
so
I'm in Las
Vegas,
and it's this wild mix. Like you'll have a fundamentalist down the street, and then you'll have a bunch of atheists on the other side.
And brothels just outside of town.
Oh yeah, always fun.
All right, well, thank you all for joining.
There will be.
Oh, go ahead.
There will be English subtitles soon. We are in a final step of making the subtitles. In our first ever Polish interview with me about street epistemology in Polish language, etc. We are so excited to release that in Polish version months ago. And soon there will be English subtitles, so all of you guys and all the rest of the world will be in up to date. That in Poland there are 2 SE funds, and English subtitles are dedicated for you all. And I will be glad to post that on SE private group when we will finish our English subtitles in that interview.
All right, awesome. Well, keep us posted on the Facebook group. All right.
Of course, I will do.
I think most of the people who are in the Hangout dropped, but Ed and Christine and Leszek, I thank you all for joining. And I would offer to let you plug your YouTube and show and SE channel, but I think Leszek, you already did that. So Ed and Christine, if you have, do either of you do the YouTube uploads thing, or y'all just?
Oh, I got nothing.
Okay.
No, I'm about to talk to that guy I was telling you that was a staunch Muslim just now. He just instant messaged me, so we'll see how that goes.
All right, and yeah, it's I'll go ahead and put the thanks, Leszek. I'll go ahead and put those links in the chat.
Yeah, maybe one day we will have English version of website. Right now, our project is strictly completely in Polish.
Awesome.
Cool.
But maybe one day.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining, and have a good day. Take care.
Bye.
You too.
Thank you very much. See you soon. Bye-bye.